I know I was invited to talk about Plato. I'm not sure that when I'm done you think I was talking about Plato, but I do want to show you. This was a present. A student that graduated last semester brought me this. When I shared this with my puppy, he just sat and stared at it for several minutes. Then he took one of the legs and he just sort of dragged it away. And I suspect after you hear what I don't have to say about Plato, you may want to do that as well. But let me start by, here's a bust of Socrates, you may know. And here's a bust of Alcibiades. Socrates, Alcibiades. Not to put too fine a point on it, in the Meno, it's already gone haywire thanks to Michelle. So, not to put too fine a point on it, in the Meno, the main interlocutor of Socrates compares Socrates to this, both in beauty and other respects. This is a torpedo fish. It's as close to Greece as I could find. I believe this is a Corsican torpedo fish. I will tell you that there is actually an academic article about torpedo fish, and as a way of the intertextual understanding of the way the ancients talked about torpedo fish, and as a way of doing history of philosophy. Meno remarked that Socrates resembled this torpedo fish in looks and other ways. Who is beautiful, Socrates or Alcibiades? Here, from Plutarch's Lives, is a vote for Alcibiades. It is not, perhaps, material to say anything of the beauty of Alcibiades, only that it bloomed with him in all the ages of his life, in his infancy, in his youth, and in his manhood. I suppose, though, even a passing familiarity with the Platonic dialogues typically leads one to cast a vote for Socrates as the beautiful one. Alcibiades might be beautiful of body, but doesn't even he attest, through Plato's dialogic character invention of him, to the inner beauty of Socrates? An inner beauty that even puts the beauty of Alcibiades to shame. Perhaps the linkage is simple and straightforward, and I can tell you that, and we can be done with it. Beauty is virtue. Virtue is knowledge of the whole, so beauty is knowledge of the whole. It is not my intent to try and do an exegesis of Plato, or even an interpretation, but rather to pull out some selections from Plato's dialogues and see what kind of suggestion they add up to. In Plato's theory of beauty, there are a number of people who have written about it. My influences are, I think, become evident as we go through. I'm interested in a constellation of concepts, a number of concepts that are there in the dialogues. And so that's my apologies to those who were counting on me saying certain kinds of things. That's so much by way of disclaimers. Symposium, without question, ties love and beauty together. Indeed, it's worth asking how it is that love and beauty get tied together. It's not clear exactly when that happened. Aristotle suggests in the Metaphysics at about 984, 985, that it was the ancients that were apparently mistaking the efficient cause of beauty with the final cause of beauty, and Hesiod apparently said this is love. That may be the first time that I'm aware of in Western literature that beauty and love get linked together. Two of our most famous images of beauty and love, however, are found in the Symposium. Apollodorus' second-hand recounting Socrates' recounting of Diotima's, I'll call it a lecture, on love finds its ultimate expression in an image, beauty itself, or an ocean, or a sea. Following Socrates' speech, we find Aristophanes trying to interject, or to object, as the case may be. He is unable to do so because of Alcibiades' party crashing. One commentator remarks that the Platonic avatar of Aristophanes is thus silenced. But that invites the question, why Plato, the actual Plato, apparently wanted to silence Aristophanes. What was it that this literary construct of Aristophanes wanted to say? Or to put it another way, what was it that Plato left unsaid on behalf of Aristophanes? Either the literary Aristophanes or the real Aristophanes. This, of course, is not the only time in the Platonic dialogues that Plato says, shh, to the poets and playwrights. My guess, the one that will guide me for the next few minutes, is that there is another way to think about beauty that's suggested in the dialogues. The Aristophanic story of love is one of our great images of love and beauty. You know the story. The circle people, four-legged, four-armed, two-headed, precursors to us, human beings. Somersault across the earth. I've always told my students that I have the image of the Pillsbury Doughboy. I do not know, I've seen drawings that do not resemble the Pillsbury Doughboy, but that is my image. Somersault across the earth and decide to challenge the gods. Zeus will brook no challenge to the natural order. Slices the circle people in half. Fearing that this cut might bring about the loss of praise for the gods, Zeus has Apollo turn their heads around facing the cut, and Apollo sews up the cut, tying it together at the navel. And thus we have human nature. Head, belly, the ever-present reminder of the cut, and genitals are finely aligned. Human nature begins with a cut in being. No doubt it is merely coincidental that the 20th century theorist, philosopher, psychologist, Jacques Lacan, links beauty with a cut in being. More interesting is the mythic reaction of these newly created human beings. Their once beautiful bodies are now ugly, an inescapable recollection of another life and their predictable failure to upset the cosmic order. The mythic Aristophanes pronounces that human being, the descendants of this divine and cosmic cut, are now coincident. To be human is to long for a return to the whole. That is, the aim of love is the overcoming of the ugliness and the neediness that now defines human nature. Perhaps a little less coincidental than Lacan's observation is C.S. Lewis's observation in his little book, Four Loves, when he remarks that divine love, the unconditioned love of a divine being, is a reminder of our essential neediness. Divine love is at once a gift and a mirror that reminds us that human nature in its most essential nature is needy, incomplete. Worse, it is incapable of overcoming this neediness on its own. How far the human has fallen from the circle people who thought that they were self-sufficient enough to challenge the Olympic gods. On the surface, it appears that Lewis locates the source of our neediness in a more soteriological context. In a way, Lewis is a compliment to Aristophanes. A god brings about our neediness, and it will take a god to overcome it. Divine love, in Lewis's view, provides the substance and reality of our natural loves, among which he includes romantic love. One of his more interesting remarks about romantic love, especially as it manifests itself in erotic desire, or the desire for satisfaction through or with, choose your favorite preposition here, another's body. In that, we take romantic love, according to Lewis, too seriously. Not that the satisfaction of erotic desire is not somehow an essential part of human nature. Rather, the event of physical satisfaction, the satisfying of physical desire, is inherently comic. There's a temptation, I think, to see the Platonic attitude toward the Aristophanic myth as dismissively comic. What else should be our reaction to the halves of the circle beings that now reproduce like fish? But that can't be all the story. That can't be the whole lesson of the original cut that defines human being, or that helps to see us an image of beauty. At Theaetetus 176, Socrates remarks that the good is always accompanied by the bad. Our mortality, more precisely, is always accompanied by the bad. My guess is that that remark is not entirely ironic. Plato has Socrates further observe that as long as we are on this earth, the good never escapes the bad. We know Plato's fondness for linking beauty and good. Meno defines virtue as desiring beautiful, some translations have it as fine, as desiring beautiful things and having the ability to acquire them. Socrates' immediate response is perhaps predictable, is precisely to ask whether all beautiful things are not also good things. Meno too easily assents, as at least one commentator has noticed. In the Symposium, Diotima, Socrates' instructor in all things erotic, asks why the attainment of beauty matters. Plato asks us to imagine that the younger Socrates is nonplussed by this question. The student Socrates has no idea what it might mean to ask what good is beauty. He, however, catches on almost immediately when she slides from the beautiful to the good. Possession of the good, recall from the dialogue, brings joy or happiness. Suppose that the good is always accompanied by the bad, as Socrates suggests in the Theaetetus. Is there any reason to think that beauty is always accompanied by ugliness? The story of the Circle people is a story of origin, or better, the essence of human nature. Human being is fundamentally fractured, or at its core, cut or broken, or rendered asunder. Unlike the gods, which are intrinsically beautiful, human being is an embarrassment. Awareness of our essential nature is a shameful awareness of our own incompleteness and hence ugliness. Once more, in the hands of the dialogues of Aristophanes, love is pursuit of the beauty of the whole. Some commentators suggest that the pursuit of the beauty in this Aristophanic sense is entirely horizontal. No pun intended. Our neediness is always focused on the body of another. Love is the pursuit of and the joining with another body. Indeed, Diotima dismisses, perhaps comically so, this view of love by suggesting that it's about missing limbs or missing parts of the body. There is no transcending element, according to some, in this Aristophanic notion of beauty, no rising above or overcoming the human condition, which Theaetetus reminds us is always accompanied by the bad. The official pronouncement, official in shutter quotes, of Plato on the Aristophanic myth of human nature, of love in pursuit of the beauty of the whole, then, is the myth that does not bring us closer to the good. Socrates, relating of Diotima's climatic lesson on the nature of love, presents us with a series of images of the genuine or real object of love. This ascent, again, ascent is in shutter quotes, this ascent is preceded by Diotima's loose constellation of beauty, good, and immortality. Love, we learn through Socrates' recounting, is the desire for the beautiful. Love itself is neither beautiful nor ugly, but rather a daemon, a spirit intermediate between human beings and the gods. This kind of spirit, Jonathan Lear remarks, is something that could not possibly be. Parenthetically, it is worth asking, if love is the spirit that links the beautiful gods and human beings, what does that tell us about human beings? Diotima has encouraged Socrates, as we saw, to link the beautiful and the good. and human nature wants the good, always. Hence, human nature desires immortality. The most common and most natural image of immortality is reproduction through the creation of children. But this is not the only image of immortality we are given. Indeed, Socrates tells us that the aim of love, according to the true sophist, the way he refers to Attainment at one point, is to give birth in beauty. I can't find wide agreement among translators or commentators about how we are to understand this remark. It might mean that beauty is the motivation, or it might mean that human beings strive for immortality by creating beautiful things. Or it might mean that beauty is both the motivation and the aim. Or perhaps it is the beauty of the dialogic encounter in which one gives birth to the ideas in the soul of another. But if this is the sense of that sentence, the midwife art of the Theaetetus is not obviously about immortality, or at least not about a soul that continues existing after it leaves the body. In fact, one commentator, named is Brill, thinks that the myths about immortality are this world-directed, or perhaps to give birth in beauty is still about something else. The images of the aim of love in Diotima's lecture are a varied lot, although they are not entirely unpredictable given what Plato writes elsewhere. If one has the right kind of instructor in erotics, one begins the search for the real object with love of a beautiful body. The power of this sort of desire is not to be underestimated. This recognition is not only Plato's. A remarkable Sanskrit poem. Let's see if I can make it. No, that's not a Sanskrit poem. This one, which has echoes of Aristotle in it. Philosophers must surely be wrong to say that attributes in substance must inhere, for her beauty burns my heart, yet I am here, and she is far away. I am reasonably confident that Plato is more than a little aware of the challenge that the body, or the desire for another's body, presents. Alan Bloom remarks in his commentary on the Republic, when Socrates ignores Cephalus's comment that old age brings relief from the savage tyrant of wanting sex, that this is a forgetting of the body which haunts the construction of the city and speech. Book 5 recognizes the fundamentally private nature of the family, and presumably among the guardians, the desire for this particular body is the greatest threat to the unity of the noble or the good city. My desire for her, or your desire for him, the comic sex of Lewis, bubble along underneath the skin of the beautiful city. The construction of the beautiful city finds that it has not loosed itself from the physical bonds that tie it to the human. Indeed, the founding guardian's inability to manage the mating habits of the guardians leads from Callipolis, the noble or beautiful city, to democracy, to oligarchy, to democracy, and finally to tyranny. The Republic asks us to contrast this unlimited lust of the tyrannic, the bad soul, with the erotic longing of the philosopher for the whole of truth. The neediness of the philosopher focuses on real beauty, according to the text, whereas the terrible neediness of the tyrant is always directed at the base and ugly. In an almost Freudian remark, Plato has the character Socrates observe that the ugliness of the tyrant knows no bounds. The worst acts of our dreams, parricide and sex with one's mother, are now tyrannic desires that one does not fear to satisfy. Sarah Brill emphasizes Plato being struck by the apparently limitless capacity of the human soul to tolerate its own badness. Rana Berger has a similar observation in her commentary on Phaedo. The search, again in shutter quotes, for the immortality of the soul, begins with Socrates remarking that the true or genuine philosophers understand philosophy as the practice of dying. This is the stuff of introductory lectures in philosophy oftentimes. That is, the soul of the true philosopher views the body as a prison. Philosophy is a conspiracy to break out of prison, to free the soul from the vicissitudes of the body. Berger, however, sees the true philosophers, again, shutter quotes around true philosophers, as having mistakenly attributed the dissension in the soul to the body. This view of the soul perhaps leads to a different way of thinking about Diotimus' story of the progress of love in the symposium. The Socratic retelling looks like the progression that the true philosopher should embrace. We progress from one image of beauty to another image of beauty. This beautiful body gives way to the promiscuity, according to some, of the beauty of body in general, or many bodies. Apparently, if a person has the right kind of instructor, this image of beauty gives way to the image of the beautiful soul. The Socratic character of Symposium does not tell us how this instruction in pursuing a different image of beauty comes about. Republic, Book 7, however, perhaps reminds us again of the true philosophers. Human being is a being that is chained to the shadows of the cave, and someone appears to break a prisoner free. The journey begins with a forcible turning around. The way out of the cave, the way toward the truth and the unrefracted light, is a forced and fearful journey. Only on discovery of the truth does the prisoner grasp the reward of the journey. This allegory is very often taken as an allegory of the relation of the philosopher with the city. But Stanley Rosen reminds us that if we take the principle analogy of the Republic seriously, that the city is the soul writ large, we should see this as a story of the journey of one's soul. Looking back to 443D, we discover the real goal of this journey, bringing order and harmony to one's soul. There are both differences and similarities between this journey out of the cave and Diotimus' instruction on the real or genuine object of love. The image of beautiful souls gives way to the image of constitutions, the ordering of society. And this image of an ordered society gives way to the image of a cosmic order, the order that scientific knowledge gives us. Each of these images of order is an image of beauty. The necessary and penultimate image is that of cosmic order. The beauty of science is the beauty of cosmic order. David Arell questions precisely this connection between beauty and order that science allegedly desires in his intriguing book, Truth or Beauty, Science and the Quest for Order. Now, I'm not in a position to comment on his interpretation of the latest scientific theories, string theory or superstring theory. I'm interested instead in his claim that the quest for truth leads us to the essential and inescapable messiness of the world, the essential disorder of the universe. While pursuing a different aim, D.H. Lawrence draws attention to the mess of love. We've made a great mess of love since we made an ideal of it. The moment I swear to love a woman, a certain woman, all my life, that moment I begin to hate her. The moment I even say to a woman, I love you, my love dies down considerably. I will pause here. Perhaps we are reminded of the French word for little death. The moment love is an understood thing between us. We are sure of it. It's a cold egg. It isn't love anymore. Love is like a flower. It must flower and fade. If it doesn't fade, it's not a flower. If it's either an artificial rag blossom or an immortelle for the cemetery. The moment the mind interferes with love, or the will fixes on it, or the personality assumes it as an attribute, or the ego takes possession of it, it's not love anymore, it's just a mess. And we've made a great mess of love, mind perverted, will perverted, ego perverted. Is love messy? And if it is, does that mean beauty's messy? Return to the symposium. The pursuit of, and perhaps appreciation of beauty of the cosmic order serves its dialogic purpose. The lover can now grasp the real object of love, beauty, the itself by itself. I did not copy this down. This is from the Republic. This is Diotima, or Socrates recounting of what Diotima I said in the Republic Symposium. And turning his eyes toward the open sea of beauty, he will find in such contemplation the seed of the most fruitful discourse and the loftiest thought, and reap a golden harvest of philosophy, until confirmed and strengthened, he will come upon one single form of knowledge, the knowledge of beauty I'm about to speak of. Whoever has been initiated so far in the mysteries of love and has viewed all these aspects of the beautiful in due succession is at last drawing near the final revelation. And now, Socrates, there bursts upon him that wondrous vision, which is the very soul of beauty he has toiled so long for. It is an everlasting loveliness which neither comes nor goes, which neither flowers nor fades, for such beauty is the same on every hand. I do not know whether D.H. Lawrence was thinking of this passage when he wrote the poem. But a few lines later, Diotima tells Socrates that this progression is the only way toward the sanctuary of love. There are various textual hints that might lead us to suspect that the only way to achieve knowledge of beauty, whatever it is not the way that can actually be completed by human beings. The someone who frees the prisoner, the right kind of instructor, where are such guides to be found? On Diotima's telling, the soul finds beauty by reaching toward a cosmic order that culminates in an apprehension, a knowledge of limitless beauty. As the soul becomes more ordered, more divine, real beauty, knowledge of beauty, comes into view. But I want to return to Aristophanes. Remember that he was silenced as Socrates finished recounting Diotima's reconstruction of the beauty that love strives for. He was silenced by Alcibiades' entrance. Plato's Alcibiades is one of the most memorable examples of the mess of love that we have in literature. And he is thus a memorable example of the ugly, of the tragic, of the comic, and the aspirations of the human desire for beauty. In his long introduction to The Being of the Beautiful, Seth Bernardetti argues by way of a further commentary on Hippias Major that the aim of philosophy is to wrest the beautiful away from the poet. The proper study of beauty is to be found in the way of philosophy. My hunch is that this way is not escaping the body. It is not escaping Aristophanes, but recognizing that human being in its most essential nature is disorderly. Just as the bad accompanies the good, the ugly accompanies the possibilities for the human being to attain beauty. In a different work, Bernardetti remarks that the Greek word translated as dialectic, the ordered conversation that is the philosopher's method, can also be understood as a word for physical intercourse. And in a fascinating work, Daniel Sherman argues that the forms exist not in some transcendent world, but in the dialogic encounter between two people. Oddly, perhaps, Richard Rorty's injunction to keep the conversation going is the way, the only way, for human beings to grasp or see beauty, not to grasp or see beauty, but to actualize or bring about beauty. If I could whisper in Aristophanes' ear, I would tell him to say something like this to Socrates. Socrates, you rascal, you. Parenthetically, at 487d of the Republic, Adamantus characterizes philosophers as cranks and rascals. One translation has it as bizarre. Philosophers are bizarre. I tell my students that philosophers are the normal people, that if they want to see the truly bizarre, they should go to the science building or to the mathematicians. But we are normal. Back to this. You want us to believe, this is me telling Aristophanes what I should say. You want us to believe that the soul has the power to escape the divine order by becoming more like the divine. You tell us that only if we escape this order and apprehend that image of pure beauty, only then will we be able to bring about the most beautiful ideas. But my dear Socrates, when Zeus made us out of our globular ancestors, he at once made us ugly and beautiful, tragic and common, incomplete yet needy, and always looking for fulfillment. Philosophers are mocked for falling in wells and staring at their navels and pondering the ethereal. Socrates, you need to spend some time staring at your navel. And remembering, human nature is a great cut-in being that we can never escape. This, Socrates, is the cosmic order, the incompleteness and disorderliness of human nature. But this order, whether ordained by Zeus or the being of the beautiful or the beingness of beings, this order sees the fulfillment of human neediness in the shepherding of that disorderliness, into form. Socrates, I will tell you why love for another body, the desire for children, or searching for physical laws and image of beauty. Because it is a drawing together of the materials that our messy and at times ugly nature and the world around us give us. We search out the other, and our dialogic encounter with that other, whether realized in the beauty of physical intercourse or the political intercourse that leads to beautiful constitutions or scientific discovery, expands the horizons by bringing beauty where before there was none. I think I was supposed to tell you something about Plato on beauty. Instead, I may have given you something that looks like a distended account of an Aristophanic account on beauty. We are forever reminded of the cut, the essential incompleteness, the disorder, the ugliness of human nature, and at the same time, given the possibility of bringing form to parts of it. Beauty is at once a terrible reminder of the essential incompleteness of human nature and a recompense for our needy and disordered condition.
Okay, so I'm supposed to talk on Plotinus. Now, Plotinus, in his massive work called the Enneads, actually wrote two complete treatises on the nature of beauty. So we have a lot of material from Plotinus where he talks about beauty. What you'll see in my presentation, in my paper, is that in trying to digest and distill all the things that Plotinus says about beauty, I do find myself talking less about kind of ontological or metaphysical things regarding beauty, though he definitely, being a Neoplatonist, relates it to the concept of form and Plato's forms, and more on its impact in human experience. Okay, so here's my attempt to distill Plotinus for you. The world can sometimes seem a dreary, ugly, or certainly a humdrum routine place. Our life in it sometimes seems one of toil, tribulation, tedium, disappointment, and sometimes even misery. Our world and life in it can sometimes seem, in essence, is devoid of beauty. The value and power of beauty and our desire and need for it is therefore centrally important to Plotinus's philosophy. He tells us, quote, "This is the spirit that beauty ever induces, wonderment and a delicious trouble, longing and a trembling that is delight." That's the effect of beauty. This Dionysiac exultation that thrills through your being, this straining upwards of all your soul, this longing to break away from the body and live sunken in the true self. That is the effects of beauty. And equally important for Plotinus, for one who understands the true nature of beauty, who has truly experienced beauty, the world and life in it is hardly as my opening Jeremiah describes it to be. So what is Plotinus' understanding of beauty, and why its importance and effects in human experience and psychology? The 19th century romance novelist Margaret Hungerford famously wrote that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Plotinus could not disagree more. He states in contrast that, quote, those who have actually known beauty judge it to exist for itself and not for them. As in the charm of the natural world, its beauty belongs to the possessor of it, namely the natural world. The experience of beauty, of course, surely lies within us, but beauty itself, for Plotinus, is an objective feature of the world and of things within it. To get at that, Plotinus asks in one of his treatises, quote, what is it that attracts the eyes of those to whom a beautiful object is presented, and calls to them, lures them towards it, and fills them with joy at the sight of the beauty? Plotinus' answer to this question is actually introduced by his critique of the Pythagorean theory of beauty. For the Pythagoreans, the experience of beauty is a response to something's proportion or symmetry, or more generally, its compositional pattern. And they conclude from this that beauty is a property that supervenes on symmetry or pattern. That, in other words, an object is beautiful because it has symmetry. Plotinus rejects this Pythagorean theory for several reasons, including, he says, symmetry or pattern is a function of the relationship between parts in a complex whole. A beautiful object, however, Plotinus says, is equally beautiful as a whole and throughout its parts. It is, as it were, beautiful all over, and not just somehow in the relationship between its parts. Moreover, Plotinus adds, objects which are not complex wholes composed from distinct parts may also be beautiful. He gives as examples a lovely color, a piece of gold, sunlight, virtues in the soul, and abstract thoughts. And picking up on these last examples, he wonders why symmetry could even, what symmetry could even mean in such potentially beautiful things as modes of life, social customs, or knowledge, and in general beauties of the soul, which he espouses the Platonic doctrine are in fact more beautiful than anything material. Rather, Plotinus argues, even in the case of beautiful material things, however, their beauty, quote, is something which we become aware of even at the first glance. The soul speaks of it as if it understood it, recognizes it, and welcomes it. Our explanation of this is that the soul, since it is by nature what it is, and related to the higher reality in the realm of form and being, when it sees something akin to that, or a trace of its kindred reality, is delighted and thrilled, and returns to itself, and remembers itself and its own possessions, end quote. Indeed, for Plotinus, what is akin to the soul, in the higher kind of reality in the realm of being, is, he explicitly tells us, Platonic form. Accordingly, he tells us, quote, we maintain that the things in this world are beautiful by participating in form. The form, then, approaches and composes that which is to come into being from many parts into a single ordered whole. It brings it into a completed unity and makes it one by agreement of its parts. So beauty rests upon a material thing when it has been brought into unity and gives itself to a whole and parts alike. So then the beautiful body comes into being by sharing in form which comes from the divine. I don't want to get into here comparing Plotinus's theory to the Pythagorean theory. Perhaps more important is Plotinus's resulting understanding and account of our experience of beauty. Plato's account of the human soul as he expresses it in his Phaedrus, where he compares the soul to a divine chariot, looms large in Plotinus's Neoplatonism and in his understanding of our experience of beauty. On Plato's account, the human soul is akin to his eternal forms, and in his chariot simile, in fact, originates in the realm of the forms, from whence it descends into the material world, where it associates with a particular physical body. Though Plotinus never references Plato's Phaedrus or implores the charioteer image himself, for him too the human soul is akin to the realm of the eternal forms, and its relationship to a particular body has it descended from its more authentic, truer, prior metaphysical state of existence. And we have seen Plotinus say, our experience of beauty is partly a function of the delight and thrill a soul feels when in perceiving some object, it therein sees or recognizes something also within it akin to the higher realm, to the realm of eternal form and prior existence. Do animals, Plotinus doesn't ask this, it occurred to me to ask it in talking about Plotinus. Do animals other than human beings experience beauty? Plotinus, I think, would say no. The experience of beauty for Plotinus is an additional, a more advanced or higher sort of experience than simply sense experience itself. Even though in the case of beautiful material objects, it accompanies or supervenes on sense experience. For Plotinus, the experience of beauty occurs when one not only sees some object and judges it to be, say, a human being, but, he says, quote, pronounces the judgment that it is beautiful by fitting the beautiful body to the form in itself, and using the form to judge the beauty as a ruler judges straightness. And this higher, more advanced mode of experience implies the likewise higher, more advanced nature of the human soul, and represents for it a higher form of experience. Plotinus says, quote, the awe and the stirring of passion towards beauty are for those only for those already in some degree awakened and knowing to the higher realm, end quote. And nor is it, even in the case of experiencing the beauty of a beautiful object, the sensible content of the experience that accounts for the delight and joy and passionate thrill and longing which Plotinus ascribes to the experience of beauty. But in it, the recognition of form and the relation of the material object to a higher realm. And indeed, he says that since with respect to material bodies, our experience of beauty is based on our memory or recollection of higher form than the material world, our experience of that higher form is also a purer and more thorough experience of beauty itself. He tells us of someone who is able of knowing the eternal realm independent of the material realm, quote, to one that shall know this vision, with what passion of love shall he not be seized, with what pang of desire, what longing to be melded into one with that realm, what wondering delight. He will be flooded with awe and gladness, stricken by a salutary terror, he calls it, end quote. Here we do also see how, indeed, Plotinus also establishes kind of connection between eros and beauty. Eros is the desire for him to meld with, to become one with, an object that we recognize to be beautiful, whether it's a physical thing, whether it's a soul, or whether it's the absolute beauty of eternity. We wish to become one with it. Accordingly, what I've been referring to for Plotinus as the experience of beauty is in fact a constellation of interrelated responses by the human soul to a beautiful object, including, first of all, an awareness of the object, either sensory or intellectual, a judgment relating the object to some form, or else a recognition of form itself. Thirdly, an affective experience of enjoyment, joy, gladness, delight. Fourth, an erotic experience, that is an inclination of wanting to become one with the object. And fifthly, a reflexive experience of uplifting, of remembering, of returning to the soul's true or more authentic self. And finally, a transcendental experience of wakefulness to the absolute beauty of simply all of reality. Okay, so I think I better stop there. Very good. Thank you.
So, Brian Clack kindly asked me to talk about St. Augustine on beauty. So, I'll tell you first something about St. Augustine. If you don't know who he was a North African who lived in the 4th and 5th century from about 354 to 430 AD. Okay, he was born to an aristocratic family. His father was a politician, a pagan. His mother was a convert to Christianity. He was given a classical education on the ancient Greek and Roman classics. He taught rhetoric for many years, which basically means that he taught ancient Greek and Roman philosophy, all the classical works. He loved Latin, he hated Greek, and he hated the boys he taught, or at least he hated teaching them, I guess. Anyway, he eventually converted to Christianity after a life of dissipation, which he details in his most famous work, The Confessions. So that is the first autobiography, I think, written in the West, Augustine's Confessions. And anyway, he eventually is ordained a priest and becomes bishop of a place called Hippo Regius, and that's why he's called St. Augustine of Hippo. So he was the original hipster. And you could say that Augustine was the first medieval philosopher. He's typically taught as the first medieval philosopher. Why? What makes someone a medieval philosopher? Well, you could say he philosophized during the Middle Ages. Well, when was that? Roughly from, I don't know, the 5th century to the 15th century. It's like 1,000 years. Very diverse time. So you could say that he sort of sets the agenda for much of what follows, but it wouldn't tell you much about what his thought is like or what medieval philosophy is like. So what is medieval philosophy? I would say this. Medieval philosophy is the philosophy done in the times and places in which the ancient and late ancient Greek and Roman philosophical patrimony was explored and developed in a new context, a religious context, dominated by the three major Western monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. That is the single longest definition of medieval philosophy ever. But I'll say it again. It's the philosophy done in the times and places in which the ancient and late ancient Greek and Roman philosophical patrimony was explored and developed in a new context, a religious context, dominated by the three major Western monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And that's what makes Augustine a medieval philosopher. He's trying to take the best of what he finds among the ancient philosophers and late ancient philosophers and develop it in light of his new faith commitments as a Christian. And you can see that in his approach to beauty. He's most influenced by Plato and by Plotinus, which is why I'm billed last on this program. So think about Plato's world and the place of beauty in it, and then you can see how Augustine takes that view and transforms it in order to make it better fit his own interests as a Christian philosopher. So Plato's world. Plato basically divides the universe in two, all right? There's this world of our experience, all right, full of material things, particular, changing, temporal, contingent, all right? And Plato says that there's another world, an immaterial, transcendent world, a world of the forms or ideas, he calls them. This world is populated by immaterial, immutable, necessary, eternal, and universal exemplars or standards or models of all of the things in this world. All right? So whereas the things in this world are passing and changing, limited and material, the world of the forms is a place of eternal standards, you could say, eternal models or exemplars. And that's where Plato locates beauty. Beauty for Plato is a form. It's an eternal idea, unchanging, inexhaustible, immaterial, eternal, necessary, and the most beautiful. And every beautiful thing in this world is a reflection somehow, some limited reflection of that most perfect form of beauty itself. So what Augustine does is he takes Plato's idea that the world is divided in two, this changing world and an unchanging world of forms, and he gives it a Christian twist. So Plato's forms or ideas in this kind of immaterial heaven become in Augustine's hands ideas in the mind of God. All right? For Plato, God is a demiurge who creates the world. Plato recognizes a creator. But he says, look, at the time of creation, the world was a mass of chaotic matter. And the God, the demiurge, looks to the realm of the forms, gazes upon the eternal standards of things, and then puts order into the chaos of matter by making those material things into the things that they are as a reflection of the eternal forms that the Creator looks at. But the Creator has to look to the forms which transcend even the Creator. They are higher than the Creator. They're standards to which the Creator must conform, to which the Creator's mind must be subject in the creation of the things in this world. Augustine says, no, that can't be right. Why? One, because there are no standards above God. There's nothing superior to God to which God must submit. So he can't say that the Creator looks at forms and then creates the world accordingly. And Plato's Creator acts upon pre-existent matter. The matter's already there in chaos. That won't do for Augustine either. As a Christian, he believes in creation out of nothing. So instead, what he says is the forms, the eternal standards of things, the ideas, the models that everything in this world reflect must be a reflection of God's ideas. God is the Creator, and he creates this world according to his ideas. The ideas are still eternal, immutable, necessary, immaterial, and they're still the models or standards or exemplars of everything in this world. But they've become ideas in the mind of God, who creates the whole world as it is, out of nothing. What that means then for Augustine is that everything in this world is somehow a reflection of God. Everything in this world is somehow a reflection of an idea in the mind of its transcendent Creator. And that means that everything in this world somehow tells us about God, and we can trace back, as it were, the good things or the good features of this world back into God as their ultimate source. And this is particularly true of beauty. So what Augustine would say is that beauty itself is God. God is the beautiful one. God is beauty itself. And everything in this particular world is beautiful by reflecting the beauty of God, its Creator. So that's the metaphysical story, you could say, about what beauty is. Beauty is God, beauty itself. And every beautiful thing in this world is beautiful insofar as it reflects the beauty of its Creator, of God. That's the metaphysical story. Maybe I have some time. It's quite remarkable because Augustine thinks that everything in this world must be beautiful. Everything is created by a beautiful God. God doesn't make crap. Everything he thinks is beautiful. Even vice. This is incredible. But even our worst habits, even our vices, he thinks are somehow a reflection of the beauty of God. I was just looking at this. I have my colleague Michael Kelly to thank for reminding me of this passage, but it's just amazing. He says, even our specious vices have a flawed reflection of beauty. This is from his Confessions. And the beauty is the beauty of God. Listen to this. How does every vice reflect God? Pride imitates what is lofty, but you alone, he's addressing God, but you alone are God most high above all things. What does ambition seek but honor and glory? Yet you alone are worthy of honor and are glorious for eternity. The cruelty of powerful people aims to arouse fear. Who is to be feared but God alone? What can be seized or stolen from his power? When or where or how or by whom? Soft endearments are intended to arouse love, but there are no caresses tenderer than your charity, and no object of love is more healthy than your truth, beautiful and luminous beyond all things. Curiosity appears to be a zeal for knowledge, yet you supremely know all. Again, he's addressing God. Ignorance and stupidity are given the names of simplicity and innocence, but there's no greater simplicity than in you. And what greater innocence than yours, whereas to evil men their own works are damaging. Idleness appears as desire for a quiet life, yet can rest be assured apart from the Lord? Luxury wants to be called abundance and satiety, but you are fullness and the inexhaustible treasure of incorruptible pleasure. Prodigality presents itself under the shadow of generosity, but you are the rich bestower of all good things. Avarice wishes to have large possessions. You possess everything. Envy contends about excellence, but what is more excellent than you? Anger seeks revenge. Who avenges with greater justice than you? Fear quails before sudden and unexpected events, attacking things which are loved, and takes precautions for their safety. To you is anything unexpected or sudden? Or who can take away from you what you love? There is no reliable security except with you. Regret wastes away for the loss of things which cupidity delighted in. Its wish would be that nothing be taken away, just as nothing can be taken from you. It's remarkable. He thinks that everything reflects the beauty of God. Even our vices, our worst characteristics, are still, in spite of ourselves, an imitation of beauty itself, God himself. Okay. So, in the time I have left, I want to tell you a little bit more about how the things in this world reflect the beauty of God. Like I said, Augustine thinks that everything is beautiful. And so you can ask, well, how then do they reflect God's beauty? What is it about each one that does so? And you could expect that the answer would differ from thing to thing. I just gave you a catalog of vices, and it reflects God in a different way. So you might think that each beautiful thing reflects God in a different way. And you'd be right about that. But there are still some general features of things that Augustine would say are the ways particularly that they reflect the beauty of God. So I want to give you those few things in the time I have left. And I think I still have a few minutes. Okay.
Yes.
So 4 things about the things of this world that make them beautiful, Augustine would say, that make them reflect the beauty of God. 4 things: number, form, unity, and order. Okay? Let's take number first. This is strange. Augustine thinks the whole world is full of numbers. All right? Everything is made up of numbers. Right? And it is beautiful because of its numbering, because of the numbers that it has or embodies or represents. Now this is probably a very odd notion. It's a Platonic idea. Get it? It's a Platonic idea taken up by Plotinus. He thinks that beauty is about number and that everything is numbered. But you can see it most especially with something like music. Augustine wrote a whole book on music, or 6 books actually, on music. And he gives this analysis of the beauty of number. And think about the numbers of which you're aware as you listen to a song, right? The beauty of a song can be analyzed in terms of the numbers involved, right? Augustine takes the example of St. Ambrose's hymn, Deus Creator Omnium. He was struck by the beauty of St. Ambrose's hymn. This is the Bishop of Milan, right, 4th century bishop. He baptized Augustine, actually, in the font of the cathedral in Milan. And Augustine says that he was struck by the beauty of the liturgy there that St. Ambrose presided over, and by the beauty of Ambrose's hymns. So anyway, Deus Creator Omnium, okay, this is God, creator of all, right? This is Ambrose's hymn. So listen. Deus Creator Omnium, polique rector vestiens, diem decoro lumine, Noctem soporis gratia. Now think of that. You realize that each part of the song is numberable, right? You've got 4 lines in a stanza, each line made up of 8 syllables. You've got the feet of the verse, long syllables, short syllables at play. And as the song unfolds, the numbers that you recognize inform your expectations about what's to come. You realize by about the 2nd line or the 3rd how this is going to go, right? Because you're picking up on the numbers in your own judgment. There are the numbers that I'm singing, the numbers informing the sound in the air as it passes to you, the numbers in your hearing. You remember those numbers and they inform your judgment about the next, all right? And you can see it as it unfolds. Deus creator omnium. And you expect another line of the same length, right? So it's clear with music how you can say that the beauty is a function of the numbering. If you took all the numbers out of the song, you'd have no beauty left because you'd have no song left. You couldn't have a song without parts that can be numbered. And Augustine thinks that's true really of all things. All things are made up of parts which are numbered, extended in certain amounts, related in certain proportions. And this play of numbers in everything, he thinks, is what makes them beautiful. So there's another great passage, I'll just give it to you, in which he describes this play of numbers in all things. It's remarkable. This is from the De Musica. Wherever you turn, by certain traces which wisdom has impressed on her works, she speaks to you and recalls you within, gliding back into interior things by the very forms of exterior things, so that whatever delights you in a body and allures you through the bodily senses, you see to be numbered. And you ask whence it is, and you return into yourself, and you understand that you cannot either approve or disapprove of that which you touch by the bodily senses, unless you have certain laws of beauty to which you refer whatever beautiful things you experience exteriorly. Look upon the firmament, the earth, the sea, and whatever in them shines from above, or creeps beneath, or flies, or swims. They have forms because they have numbers. Take away these things from them, and they will be nothing. From what, therefore, are they, unless from him from whom number is, God? Since existence is to them in proportion as they are numbered. And 2, human artisans of all corporeal forms have numbers in their art, to which they adapt their works. Hands and instruments move in working, until that which is formed without, referred to that light of number which is within, obtains completion insofar as is possible, and is pleasing to the internal judge, gazing upon supernatural numbers through the interpreting sense. Seek then what moves the members of the artisan himself. It will be number, for those also are moved numerically. And if you withdraw work from the hands, and from the soul the intention of making, and that movement of the member be referred to pleasure, it will be called dancing. If you move your members in time, in number, you have dancing. Seek therefore what gives pleasure in dancing. Number will make answer to you. Behold, it is I. Examine now the beauty of the formed body, of a sculpted body. Numbers are confined in place. Examine the beauty of movement in a body. Numbers are whirled about in time. Enter into the art whence these proceed. Seek in it time and place. At no time will it be, at no place will it be. Nevertheless, number lives in it. Its region is not of spaces, nor is its age of days. And nevertheless, when they who wish to become artists apply themselves to the learning of art, they move their body through places and times, but their soul through times. With the increase of time, to be sure, they become more skilled. Transcend, therefore, also the soul of the artisan, in order that you may see everlasting number. Now wisdom shall shine upon you from the interior seat itself, and from the very inner chamber of truth. If she repel your still languid gaze, carry back the eye of the mind to that way where she shows herself cheerfully. Remember well that you have deferred a vision which you, become stronger and more healthy, may again seek. So he thinks numbers are everywhere. And you can see what an incredible rhetorician Augustine was. This is classical rhetoric on display. It reads almost like poetry, and I have ensnared you all. So that's number. Last three things: form, unity, and order. Okay, he thinks that everything has not only number but also form. All material things have some form, some arrangement, some structure that makes their matter into the kind of thing that it is. And that form, he thinks, makes them beautiful. Nothing is completely devoid of form, and therefore nothing is completely devoid of beauty, he would say. Ugliness is the lack of due form, but nothing could be completely ugly, because to lack all form would be to be nothing at all, would be not to exist at all. Everything is beautiful because everything has form. Unity, everything is somehow one. Anything that you could name is one of those things, one thing. You can't get away from unity. Things exist to the extent that they are one, to the extent that their parts are unified and make up one thing. And he thinks that this unity gives them beauty. It gives them harmony, a proportion of their parts, a symmetry and equality. He doesn't reduce beauty to these things, but he thinks that unity follows beauty around, you could say. It gives rise to it. It is its source. Only God is absolutely one, he would say, the one God, and the unity among the three persons of God is the, you might say, the tightest unity that you could have. Everything else is unified or one to some lesser degree, to the extent that its parts make up one thing. And when those parts cohere well and unify into one thing, they are beautiful. And order, this is the last one. Order, he thinks, is just as ubiquitous as number, form, and unity, and therefore of beauty itself. Order is about the things having their parts in the right place, in the right kind of relations, and the whole thing itself having its right place in a whole in which it's at home. So if my nose were, off on my cheek here, that would be less beautiful because noses belong right here. That's the due order of a face. And if I were off somewhere else, you might say, Augustine might say, rather than right here, right now, I'd be in the wrong place. This is just where God wants me right now. And as I become a part of this whole which we're constituting, this dialogical unity that you say gives rise to beauty itself, I am a part of an order that is beautiful, and I participate and contribute to that beauty by my place in that order. Unity, form, and number, you could say, are the sort of truth of things. They're what make things real. Order, you could say, is the goodness of things. It's what makes things good. Beauty is when the truth of things, their reality, their number, form, and unity, and their goodness shine forth. Beauty is the shining forth, for me, of the truth and goodness of things. And that truth and goodness are a reflection of truth itself and goodness itself. Beauty itself, which is God. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I have a response. Thank you for the enlightenment. It seems that whether you're talking about circle people, divided and were incomplete, and so therefore ugliness, it reminds me of one line from a Chinese poem: "The moon reflects itself in 10,000 times in the stream." And I was thinking that, in a way, because we're alienated from the true unity, we have this sort of manifestation of incompleteness and partial unity. And I was thinking that really it was, if ugliness manifests itself, it's really about the fragmentation, the reflection of the moon in the 10,000 stream. 10,000 times in the stream is because it's fragmented, right? And you could think of that as that fragmentation itself is a kind of like relationship between being and nothingness. And not that I believe what I'm saying, but nonetheless, I understand how that being and nothingness comes about. So if you are able to look at the reflection and look past the fragmentation and just see that it was, in some sense, a pure reflection of the bloom itself, then in a sense, then you, in a sense, have a truer understanding of the true forms in that sense, right? And so in that sense, if you could eliminate the nothingness from being incorporated into being, you don't have to talk about ugliness. Ugliness is actually the relationship of the nothing that arises from the fragmentation, right? And so in that sense, it kind of leads me to Sartre. I mean, like, so in that sense, if you truly have come closer to the form, and I think because our mind, our understanding cannot ever really totally appreciate that, we have a better connection, I guess, through beauty, to that understanding of the whole, even though that whole is fragmented, either in the circular people being cut up, or in the fragmentation that comes about in the reflection. Would you say that that's really kind of a classical interpretation, what you guys been talking about, all three of you actually?
It's certainly true for Augustine. He would love your talk of fragmentation. This is one of the primary themes of his Confessions. He thought that his life before his conversion, this life of immorality and debauched dissipation, was a life of fragmentation. And he saw his conversion as a process of self-reunification. He says to God, "You stitched together the strands of my being." That was his conversion, from fragmentation to unity.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, right. Plotinus very much has this idea that when we experience something we call beauty, when we have a beautiful experience, when we have an experience of beauty, that at once that directs us to recognize the goodness that is in this world, but directs us to something higher as the source of it. It's what really awakens the soul, he says, and gives it the thrill of its authentic being. So yes, I appreciate very much what you're saying. Indeed.
So in a way, beauty has a way of calling to us, even though we do not understand the whole, and none of us has the power, because in some sense its form is deposited in the thing, whereas like I think we're more disconnected from truth and rationality in a way. Right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. It's both healing. It's kind of paradoxical because the experience of beauty is both a healing experience, but at the same time an awareness that we're not quite whole yet, that there is something more yet for us to achieve, to arrive at. So it's both healing, at the same time we realize that there's a greater health awaiting or available for us.
thank you.
I saw some other hands. No?
Yes, please.
I had one for Dr. Nevitt, real quickly, maybe quick. Basically, you talked about the Platonic forms being God's ideas in Augustine's version of it.
Yeah.
And what is it that makes beauty God itself as opposed to an idea of God?
Oh, excellent question. I should have mentioned that. The answer is the doctrine of divine simplicity. So Augustine thinks, and this is true of the whole classical theistic tradition actually, that he sort of inaugurates, that God is absolutely simple. God has no parts, God has no properties, God has no divisions within himself at all. And so what that means for Augustine, his classical way of putting this, is God is what he has. So God has these ideas, but because of God's simplicity, he must actually be those ideas. And that means that it's just as well to talk about God in the concrete or in the abstract. You can say God is beautiful, you can say God is beauty itself. God is wise, or God is wisdom itself, because God is what he has on account of the doctrine of divine simplicity. Yeah.
I think there's also a reflection in St. Augustine also, as you were getting at, of a principle in Plotinus that Augustine read. Plotinus has this principle that effects have to be like their cause in some sense. Effects have to be like their cause in some sense. So if something is true about an effect, it must be true in some superior way about its cause.
Yeah.
So the divine realm, the divine, is the cause of all beauty. And so in some sense, the concept of beauty must primarily and first of all refer to the divine realm, because that's the cause of beauty in this realm. So it must be even more beautiful, or a higher beauty.
Yeah. Because a cause can't give what it doesn't have.
Right.
Yeah.
Vision is really predominant in the Platonic tradition, and in fact, yeah, it's so fascinating the way the way Augustine brings in sound with music. I mean, that itself is very but vision tends to be very much predominant. You know, so some people has hypothesized that maybe people, they didn't have very refined palates back then, or something. I have no idea.
Interesting. I mean, certainly for a philosopher like Augustine, he does put a premium on vision, because vision, he thinks, is a sense experience which is most like thought, most like a higher experience of intellection. On the other hand, Augustine is down on imitative arts, but that's a Platonic theme as well. So sculpture and artistic representations like paintings, he thinks that those are less valuable as art and less beautiful than more pure or creative art. So something like music, precisely because it's less imitative, it's less representative, he thinks that it is a superior art form and more beautiful. That's kind of interesting. And you might say something like the cake or taste, that's even less imitative. You know, there's something even more creative in the cooking. Unless you bake the cake into the shape of something, you all have seen these horrors.
Mickey Mouse cakes.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, those are ugly. It's because they're cheap imitations.
Mickey Mouse cake ugly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Well, not completely ugly.
Oh, okay.
Nothing is, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which actually Plotinus would agree with that as well. That
Yeah.
that when we call something ugly, and when we've thought of something ugly, the most we can mean by that is that, in some sense, it's less beautiful than something else. But the only thing that it could be less beautiful than is something that's closer to the divine.
Yeah. Yeah, it's too bad. Augustine wrote an early work on beauty, De Pulchro et Apto, on the beautiful and the fitting, or the apt, but it's lost. So our best source for his views on beauty comes from the De Musica, and of course their number dominates. I mean, the first 5 books on music actually are horrible. Even Augustine thought they were horrible. It's this long analysis of meter, classical meter, all of the numbers involved. I mean, it's just excruciating. Book 6 really gets interesting, though, and Augustine thought that was the only real book of value there. But it's too bad we don't have the earlier source, because it'd be interesting to see what he says about beauty in some other context where other concerns aren't really driving the discussion. Yeah. That's too bad.
Super interesting. So when I heard you sing, it just kind of reminded me. This is purely anecdotal to some extent, but sometimes there's something about song and various forms of music that I've always kind of had a hard time wrapping my head around in terms of a kind of affective experience, that it really gets into you. Right? I mean, in a way that visual things that are beautiful, at least in my experiences, don't get into. But if you're listening to a really wonderfully constructed symphony or aria, it just gets in you, right? I mean, it kind of has a pulsation that it produces in you at an effective level. The beauty of it is it has a kind of immediacy that's unavoidable.
like as a contrasting example, like a really awful smell, you just kind of can't avoid it. But like the vision metaphor is dominant, and yet like at an effective level, you think about beauty in these other registers, and again, your song kind of made me think about this. Like it just penetrates you, and you can't escape it. It's interesting. Anyway.
And Augustine recognizes that, and it was actually a source of concern for him. He was worried about the use of music in prayer, because of course all these prayers are set to music. You've got the singing of the Psalms. And Augustine was concerned that he was more delighted by the music than by the truth of the texts he was singing. And he said, if you get yourself in that position, it would be better to recite the text rather than sing it, until you can purify yourself, as it were, and love the truth of the text more than you love the beauty of the music. Yeah.
No, this could go on for much longer, but we are unfortunately out of time. I'm sure you'll be hanging around to take individual questions for a while. But it just remains for me to say thank you so much for kicking off the series of panel discussions on beauty. And please come and join us next week. It's art next week, isn't it? Music, beauty and art next week. Where topics concerning beauty and ugliness will be addressed. So,
Cool.
It will be fascinating. So thanks for leading us on in such a profound and beautiful way.
Sure.